Just hours ago, the world of NASCAR was hit with devastating news that felt almost impossible to process. Kyle Busch, one of the most controversial, fearless, and legendary drivers in modern racing history, was reported dead at the age of 41. For longtime NASCAR fans, the shock felt surreal, because for nearly 2 decades, Kyle Busch looked indestructible. He survived violent crashes, public hatred, psychological pressure, physical punishment at nearly 200 miles per hour. He built an entire career around intensity. And somehow, it always felt like Rowdy would keep coming back. Louder, faster, more aggressive than before. But now, the engine noise has stopped. And behind the headlines, behind the championships, behind the boos, rivalries, and unforgettable victories, people are now looking back at a man whose entire life became consumed by pressure. Because while fans saw confidence every Sunday on the racetrack, few people truly understood the psychological weight Kyle Busch had been carrying for years. The expectations, the criticism, the fame, the danger, the emotional isolation, and the brutal reality of spending your entire life inside one of the most unforgiving sports on earth. This is the dark story behind Kyle Busch. Before the championships, before becoming one of the biggest names in NASCAR, there was Las Vegas, Nevada. Long before millions of fans knew his name, Kyle Busch was already obsessed with racing. Speed surrounded his childhood. Engines, tracks, competition. It became part of everyday life. And almost immediately, people noticed something different about him. Even as a young driver, Busch raced with unusual intensity. Not reckless, focused, aggressive in a way that felt deeply personal. Winning mattered to him emotionally. Losing seemed to affect him psychologically. And over time, that competitiveness became the center of his identity. But there was another layer of pressure quietly building in the background. His older brother, Kurt Busch, had already become a NASCAR star, a champion, a respected figure in the sport. And suddenly, Kyle Busch was no longer just chasing success. He was chasing comparison. In elite sports, that kind of pressure can quietly shape a person for life. Every mistake becomes public. Every failure becomes humiliation. Every race becomes emotional survival. And instead of collapsing beneath that pressure, Kyle Busch transformed himself into one of the most dangerous competitors NASCAR had ever seen. Then came the professional level. And almost instantly, the sport realized Kyle Busch was different. His reflexes looked elite. His instincts felt unnatural. His confidence intimidated people. But alongside the talent came controversy. Kyle Busch quickly became one of the most polarizing drivers in NASCAR history. Fans either loved him or absolutely hated him. There was almost no middle ground. Some admired his honesty, his fearlessness, his refusal to fake emotion. Others saw arrogance, aggression, ego. Crowds booed him loudly at races. Media criticism followed him constantly. And slowly, the image of Rowdy became larger than Kyle Busch himself. That's the dangerous thing about fame. Eventually, the character the world creates around you can become impossible to escape. Because once millions of people decide who you are, you stop being treated like a human being. You become a symbol. And for Kyle Busch, that symbol became emotional warfare. Year after year, the pressure intensified. NASCAR is not simply a sport. It is psychological survival at extreme speed. Drivers spend hours inches away from catastrophe. One mistake can destroy careers or lives. And mentally, living under that level of pressure changes people. The constant adrenaline, the danger, the expectation to remain fearless publicly, even while carrying exhaustion privately, People close to Busch often described him as relentlessly competitive, even outside racing. Because for athletes psychologically conditioned to survive pressure constantly, normal life can begin feeling unfamiliar. Winning becomes emotional security, and criticism starts feeling deeply personal. But despite everything, the victories kept coming. Kyle Busch became one of the winningest drivers in NASCAR history. Championships, historic moments, legendary rivalries, iconic performances. The image of Rowdy became immortal inside motorsports culture. Yet behind the confidence, there were moments where the emotional cost became visible. Frustration, outbursts, isolation. Not because Kyle Busch lacked strength, but because years of pressure slowly leave scars people rarely see publicly. Then came the reports that shocked NASCAR fans across the world. Kyle Busch had reportedly been hospitalized with a severe illness. At first, many people believed he would recover, because throughout his career, Busch had survived things that seemed impossible. Violent crashes, physical punishment, emotional pressure, public criticism. He always came back. That became part of his legend. But this time, the outcome became devastating. Confirmation arrived that Kyle Busch had died at just 41 years old. And suddenly, the entire NASCAR world fell silent. Fans struggled to process it. Drivers released emotional tributes. Commentators appeared visibly shaken. Because regardless of whether people loved him or hated him, almost everyone respected what Kyle Busch represented. Intensity, passion, fearlessness, and complete dedication to racing. Social media exploded with memories from fans who had watched him for years. Historic races, legendary moments, emotional rivalries, and beneath all of it, there was grief. Real grief. Because once the noise of competition disappeared, people were reminded that behind Rowdy, there was still a human being. A husband, a father, a brother, a competitor who spent nearly his entire life carrying impossible pressure publicly. And perhaps that is why the news hit so hard emotionally. Because Kyle Busch represented something larger than NASCAR itself. He represented the psychological cost of greatness, the loneliness that can exist behind confidence, the emotional burden of spending years being judged by millions of strangers, and the terrifying reality that sometimes, the strongest-looking people are fighting invisible battles nobody fully understands. Today, Kyle Busch's legacy remains permanently embedded in racing history. His championships became legendary. His personality became unforgettable. His impact changed NASCAR forever. But behind the success story, there is also a darker human story. A young boy obsessed with proving himself. A competitor psychologically shaped by pressure. A public figure trapped between admiration and criticism. And a man who spent most of his life racing against danger itself. Because sometimes, the pressure of becoming legendary can slowly consume the person underneath the legend. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe to Dark Human Stories for more emotional sports documentaries, psychological celebrity stories, hidden struggles behind greatness, and powerful untold human stories. And remember, the world often celebrates greatness without fully understanding the emotional price people pay to achieve it.